Everyone told me to play Scorn. Man, this game has been everywhere. It's been in development for years, but I had never even heard of it. Shows you how much I pay attention. I'm honestly happy about that. Going into Scorn completely fresh is probably the best way to play it. When it came out, I saw the art for it, but I only watched a few seconds of a trailer and avoided any reviews. All I knew was what I heard some people saying, that you shouldn't expect a shooter, you should expect a slow-paced puzzle game. So that's what I was ready for. Is that what it is? Well, sometimes. Scorn is quite unevenly split between walking sim, survival horror, and puzzle game. I wouldn't necessarily say it greatly succeeds at any of those, but the way it puts them together is unique and memorable. First and foremost, this is one of the most visually stunning games I have ever had the pleasure of experiencing. Maybe it's just the horror fan and alien fan in me, but navigating a world full of H.R. Giger-inspired art and disgusting gore is much more to my interest than many other slow-paced adventures you could recommend to me. I'm normally not one for stopping to admire the view all that much, but Scorn left me breathless several times, and I just stood there taking in the incredible creations in this demented and incomprehensible place. Whenever there was something up in the sky, I had to look. When things got violent and bloody, my eyes were glued to the screen. And while all the locations have the same mood and colors for the most part, I enjoyed wandering through them all to the end. Mainly because of the changing ways that you move around. One place will have you ascending and descending in elevators, one has you mutilating yourself to open doors and launching grenades to break open new sections, and one has you disemboweling a giant and using his flesh to enter a central area to activate a puzzle. This kind of variety went a long way in helping Scorn keep my attention despite its fairly lackluster gameplay. If all the game offered was find the key and match the pattern to open the door, I wouldn't have been nearly as entertained. So yeah, I could go on and on about the art and how amazing the atmosphere is, but that's all quite obvious. How does this thing play? And do I like it as a game? I'll say that by the end of Scorn, I'm glad I stuck with it, and I certainly like it more than I dislike it. I wouldn't even say that I dislike it at all, but that doesn't mean I don't have any issues with it. Since I mentioned 3 kinds of gameplay, I'll go through each one and tell you what I think. Survival horror. Once the combat starts, it's very basic and very clunky. That's no problem for me, that's how the survival horror genre got started in the first place. There is no inventory management, there are no riddles, but there is backtracking puzzle design, fight or flight decision making, and solid resource management due to limited health and ammo that get refilled at sporadic supply stations. Your starting weapon is a crappy little close-range pressurized hammer thing that'll take 5 or 6 hits just to kill the most common enemy type. It can only be fired twice before having to recharge, and in that moment all you can do is run away and avoid enemy projectiles until you can get in for another hit. It's awkward, it isn't very satisfying, and it'll leave a lot of you taking tons of early game damage. While this weapon is total crap, I think it works well in the concept of survival horror. Once you're given a pistol, which only holds 6 rounds and takes ages to reload, while also slowing your movement speed to a crawl while doing so, you're put into situations where your survival horror brain starts to think, okay, I can shoot this guy a couple times and finish him off with the hammer just to save the pistol rounds. I started playing risky, running in to kill someone with the hammer because I knew I could, saving ammo, but sometimes sacrificing some health because it was so awkward. Sometimes I tried to avoid enemies to save their resources, only to have to confront them on my way back through these parts as I was solving puzzles. That's classic survival horror right there, and it's very much appreciated because you don't see it too much these days. What started as weird and frustrating combat eventually became tactical and interesting combat based on health and ammo decisions. I had a decent time with it. It's nothing to write home about, but it gets the job done. I think Scorn could use some difficulty options to decrease the amount of resources given at the recharge stations because I did end up finishing the game with a pretty comfortable supply of pistol and rifle bullets. And there's definitely people better than me out there who are probably not going to struggle much. I'd love to see higher difficulty options for them and for everyone so there's more replay value. The last thing I'll say about the combat is that I wish there was more of it, and that it should have started much earlier because the first couple hours of this game are painfully slow. Walking sim. I hate walking sims. I have never enjoyed a game where I'm just moving my character forward and experiencing world and story. Maybe I have enjoyed one and I just don't remember it, Paratopic was kinda interesting, I guess. I just have no interest in the genre. Scorn is largely a walking sim. While it does contain the occasional puzzle and combat sprinkled throughout, most of the game is walking. Slowly. The run speed is very slow, which I don't mind too much until I get lost and end up wandering around trying to figure out where to go. That's when I wish there was faster movement. I understand you can't just make the character faster, that would mess up combat balance and maybe some other things, so I'm not asking for that. I'm just saying I get annoyed by the speed sometimes. But what really bugs me is that there's a run button at all. The run is so slow it might as well be your default walk. And there's no always run option, so I held my finger firmly on the run button for the whole game. I mean, there's no reason not to be running, so I don't get it. My finger got so tired from holding run that I had to switch the keybind halfway through. The levels in Scorn are large and at times confusing due to the lack of a map, but they're not so large and confusing that you can't figure them out with some effort and time. If you start sectioning levels off and you say, okay, I'm going to fully explore this upper left area and make a note of what's there and what I need to come back to, you'll eventually get a good sense of where you are. What disappoints me about Scorn is what you're doing and how a lot of the game is just a linear set of switch pressing. It gets a little better later on when the maps get so large that you're trying to remember where to go so you can get back to the switch that you know you need to press or the door you need to open. There's at least more thought involved in that. It's just that a lot of what you're doing is hit this button, now go hit this button, now this one. Oh, you can't press this button until you press the other button, so go press that one and come back. Though the events that these switches trigger are interesting, there isn't much problem solving going on here. Passing these sections isn't very emotionally satisfying or even relieving, and there aren't any mistakes to be made. There's nothing you can fail at that has a consequence, and you can't do things outside their set-in-stone order most of the time. One part that really confused me was in Act 3, where there's 3 buttons controlling the elevator access. You have to press button 1 first, which opens the top level. You explore that area and do what you have to, and come back. Now both remaining buttons can be pressed. I followed the order and pressed button 2, which opened the second floor. I did what I had to, came back, pressed button 3, which opened the bottom floor, taking me back to the starting area of the map where I was now able to complete an earlier task. Out of curiosity, I replayed this section to see if I could do things differently. Well, not really out of curiosity, I was forced to replay the level because I fell out of the map into Glitch Town, and the checkpoint reloaded me back into the nothingness and I had no option but to replay the whole level, which is why Scorn needs a manual save system, or at least a way to reload from different checkpoints. It's not an action game, it's not fun to replay these sections of slow walking and hitting switches when you've already done it. Anyway, on my second attempt I said, hey, what if I press button 3 before button 2? And I did that. What happened? It opened the same second floor area that button 2 did the first time. I felt tricked, like the game was lying about its linearity. Why is this choice even here if it does nothing? That was honestly the most disappointing aspect of Scorn, the feeling that you're rarely doing more than just walking to the next switch in a programmed order of events that you have no control over. It is helped by the fact that the animations and art are so grotesque and impressive, and that is broken up by combat encounters and real puzzles, but I wish there was more to it. I don't want you to think that it's all mindless though. There were several sections where I was trying to figure out where I needed to go, what I needed to do to progress. And I found some of these sections very enjoyable, regardless of their straightforward, decisionless design. There's a nice feeling when things aren't obvious, and after a while you say, oh, if I do this, then that will happen, and then I can do this over here. Those moments were nice, so please don't think that I'm saying I had no fun at all going through the world puzzles. It's just that they don't feel like puzzles most of the time. Since you don't have an inventory of multiple key items, you're never trying to figure out what could be used where. You only ever have one thing, and you gotta take that one thing to the one place where it can be used. That's disappointing. There's no figuring out that the box of soda can be used to knock the bag free in the garbage chute so you can get a puzzle item. Nothing that involved. And just as a warning to everyone wanting to play Scorn, certain structures can only be activated if you have your primary weapon out, the hammer. You'll walk up to something and it'll say it can't be used, and that makes you think that you have to do something else first, but no, it's actually just that you don't have the hammer out. So be careful of that. You don't want to end up wandering around lost because you didn't try that. Puzzles, our last category. How does Scorn perform as a puzzle game? Well, I guess that's going to depend on how much you like puzzles and what kinds of puzzles you like. Some people love a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, some like a Rubik's Cube, some like that tilty box thing where you have to balance the metal ball along the path until it reaches the end without falling in the holes. What's that thing called? It was always in the lobby at the dentist's office when I was a kid. I was terrible at it. It's the kind of puzzle you see in Monkey Ball. I don't remember the name. I need to see a dentist soon. Someone remind me in the comments. I already discussed the world puzzles. Most of them aren't really puzzles at all, just an order of switches, but here and there you will find an actual puzzle. Not often, but sometimes. Some people will find them to be annoying pace ruiners. I thought they were the best part of the game. I enjoyed every single one, just as I would a puzzle in classic Resident Evil or Silent Hill. A few of them took me a while to figure out, but finding their solution was very satisfying. I absolutely love the one where you have to manipulate the device to fit the path. I thought the power node puzzles were fun to figure out, and now I can solve them quickly, and I can't praise the labyrinth puzzle enough. It was one of the easier ones to figure out, but I think the design is brilliant. If Scorn had double the amount of real puzzles throughout its 5-hour playthrough, I would love it. As it stands now, I just like it. It was a cool experience that had just enough to keep my attention. There were moments where I was bored out of my mind in the first half, and just when I thought about stopping, I'd get involved in something enjoyable and keep going. I completed it in 2 days and 2 sessions, and I might even give it another spin. Great recommendation, you guys. I hope everyone screaming for a Mayo Scorn video is happy with this one. If you want to pick up Scorn, I'd say wait for a sale because it is kind of short, and while that doesn't have to be a bad thing, I mean I recommended Shadow Warrior 3 and it's pretty short, Scorn also doesn't offer much in the way of replay value. Thanks for watching.